Hey everybody, this is Dave of ffdraftprep.com. Right now we're going to run through a mock draft using the 2016 draft dashboard in order to give you an idea of how the tool works and to demonstrate how it streamlines the decision-making process by adding levels of meaning and context to the draft that would be entirely unavailable if using your league software. It allows you to constantly remain on top of all draft developments and really quickly process all relevant data. If we head over to the settings tab, you can see that we're going to be in a 12-team league, snake-style draft. We'll use a PPR data source, one of the many. We're going to use the pre-populated FFDP tiers. I've already filled out the starting roster requirements, added some team nicknames. As you can see, we're going to be drafting 10th. So if we head over to the player info tab, you can see that we've included a count of the number of times that we own a player. We've identified some targets. These three columns that you have right here, or rather right here, they can be customized by users to include any metrics they want. And the information that we include on this tab will pull into the dashboard. So again, you can update whatever you want in these three columns here. Personally, I think that the best way to use the tool is to boil down players into a single metric that bakes in all considerations. This allows us to bucket players into groups of similar outcomes, which will really change the way that we think about the draft and do so for the better. So if we head over to the main interface over here, you can kind of see what the tool really looks like at its heart. So let's pretend that the first couple of picks get made. When a player is drafted, to designate that in the tool, you simply find his name anywhere in a listing and you press Control W on his name. He's going to be pulled into the drafted players column and everything in the tool will update. So let's pretend that the draft moves along. Again, we're going to be picking 10th. And we're just pressing Control W. Real easy to find guys in the listing, designate them as selected, especially because this is based upon ADP. So we are almost up. Allen Robinson gets taken. We're now on the clock. So let's take a look at what we have. We have this available table, available players table, where we can toggle by positions. We could look at flex. We could look at all players. We could look just at wide receivers. Come down here, we get a quick count of the number of players available by position in each tier and the number of starting roster spots left in aggregate across the league to be filled. Panic picks column gives you reasonable selections that you could make based upon an intersection of the tiers that you're using as well as your ADP source. This table tracks the count of players for each position on each team, which is really useful, especially if you're drafting on the corner. Again, ADP available. You can see how many picks were up and up here. This is something that I've never used before, but I put in for this year's. I think it's going to be really helpful. It shows you for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 picks based upon ADP how many players at each position are going to be taken. Tiers are reflected visually in these graphs. You can track developments of your team or any other in this tab here. And there's the scarcity analysis, which we'll discuss in our next pick below. So if I'm looking, I'm normally a wide receiver heavy kind of guy. So let's just say that we start our draft going with a tier 1 wide receiver in Des Bryant. So we make that selection. Now there's two more picks, or excuse me, there's two teams picking between us and our next pick. They make their selections and we find ourselves on the clock again. So if we come down here to the scarcity analysis, there's three separate components to this. One is comparing the number of starters remaining in the highest tier at that position. The second, this middle graph, is taking a look at the amount of starters left to be chosen against the total population and the quality of population of players at that particular position. So it's kind of a weighted way of looking at the tiers. And then finally, this portion of the graph is going to look at your specific team in relation to this weighted tiers calculation and, in looking at the players that you've already selected, telling you where you might want to think about spending your next pick if you're focused in on kind of looking at the opportunity cost of your selection. So with that being said, let's just pretend that we're still going to stick with this wide receiver heavy strategy. We're going to go Jordy Nelson, load up on receivers early. All right. A couple picks will go by. You'll notice that under the team overview table, there's a listing of the players that we've selected. As you filled out more of your roster, the guys that are in the flex spot will change. That will all update nicely. Also, under that table, you'll see that there's a graph. What that does is it's going to take the average tier of your starters and compare that with the league average. So that's something that gets more meaningful as the draft progresses. All right, so it's pick 34. We're back on the clock. Let's get ourselves grounded very quickly. The teams that are going to be drafting in between this pick and our next one have 2 running backs, and the other has an equal distribution with 1 running back, 1 wide receiver. We have 2 running backs left in tier 2, 13 in tier 3, 1 wide receiver in tier 2, and a count of 10 in tier 3. Scarcity analysis is showing that wide receiver is pretty scarce at this point, but our needs might be for a running back. And we're going to go with somewhat of a balanced approach. That's probably going to be good advice to take. So let's pop over. We'll look at the running backs. In tier 2, it's DeMarco Murray and Ezekiel Elliott. Let's say that we like Zeke. Maybe he ends up in a good situation once the draft takes place. We draft him. I should note I'm recording this in April, so everything that's in here really just placeholders at this point. Tiers will be updated after the draft, and as we get closer to the season, obviously teams will be updated. ADP is going to update, and the really cool thing is that once you have the file, every time you open it, all of the updates that we make on our end will get pushed to your file. Everything will update. You don't need to do a thing. So that's pretty sweet. Really happy about that. So it's our pick. We just went with Zeke. We're going to be up in right now. So we get ourselves grounded again. You can see our needs are still pointing towards running back. On a weighted scarcity analysis, wide receivers actually running pretty thin. I think it's safe to say, though, that we can probably wait and still get a wide receiver in tier 3. Especially if we look up here, that might become evident. So maybe we want to cash in that 1 more running back in tier 2, and we select DeMarco Murray. So let's take a look. If we were to toggle here and we look at a different team, you're going to notice that team needs are going to be different, right? This team really needs a wide receiver. You can see that this graph is related just to them. So the Pats here are probably going to want to think about filling out their wide receivers as we move along. So we'll pop back over to the FFDP team, and we'll watch what transpires as the next round of picks are made. And if you're worried about being able to get picks in as time moves along, I find that really after the first couple of rounds, you have a lot of time to ground yourself. I've been using different iterations of the spreadsheet for years. Finally at the point where I've really refined it to something that I feel awesome about. And I've never really had any trouble in getting the player names in. And that was even with kind of doing a variant of doing the search on the first couple of letters of players' names before. So this year I think it's going to be a breeze. So we're back on the clock, and our needs are actually kind of pointing towards quarterback. I'm a big proponent on waiting on quarterback. I'll be fine scooping up one of these tier 3 quarterbacks. Same goes for tight end. So let's think about our situation that we have. If we were to look at Raiders and Chargers and look at their players and think about what they might do, that team is probably not going to go running back. This team is probably going to go wide receiver. So I think there's going to be a couple of wide receivers taken. If we pop back over to FFDP, I'm thinking that makes me believe that we should probably consider getting one of these remaining tier 3 wide receivers while we can. Of course, we could maybe get it in this pick too at the 6. So I think it really comes down to how we want to spend these 2 picks. Let's just say that, again, we're kind of focused on wide receivers. So we'll go Brandon Marshall. See what transpires here, and we should have an opportunity to get a running back with this pick. So now if we pop over to tier 3 running backs, I personally would like Giovanni Bernard. We'll select him. And maybe now we'll run through one more round of picks. If you have any questions on anything about the tool, any comments, things that you're wondering about, shoot an email to ffdraftprep@gmail.com. Can take you through any questions you might have. As the season approaches, we're going to be putting up all kinds of tutorials, taking you through very specific pieces of the tool. There's some things you can do with it that we haven't even got into yet, and we won't in this video. And also, we'll just show you how to set things up, how to make trades work correctly, really just try to answer as many questions as you could have. So we're back up. Let's get ourselves grounded. At this point, tier 3, getting low on both running back and wide receiver. I think it's safe to say that the wide receivers are probably going to go more than the running backs on these two teams, because this team might grab their quarterback, might grab their tight end. That would make me lean towards wide receiver. And again, down here in this scarcity analysis, you can see that might be the play. So let's see. If we were to go to flex, we could compare. What a tier 3 wide receiver looks like compared to a tier 3 running back. Personally, I think at this point I would still go with the tier 3 wide receiver. Maybe we go to Deshaun Jackson. We watch things come back around. We're back up. Again, I'm not really too concerned about this down here. You know, this is not the gospel. It's just guidelines. I don't care about getting the quarterback. So now might be the appropriate time to capitalize on that one running back left in tier 3, who would be LeGarrette Blount. Select him. And now here's a couple cool things that we can look at. And this tab gets more meaningful as the draft goes along, but you have your draft board showing you a breakdown of each team, who they selected each round. We scroll down, you'll see there's this tiers by team graph, which is pretty cool. You can compare two teams in these graphs. This is showing you their tiers by position. You want these to be smaller, so you want a lower average on tiers. However, we invert this here to show you your starters in your tiers weighted, which is probably something I'll explain in another video. But so you have some kind of cool graphs that you can look at once the draft's done, maybe even as it's going along. Can jump back to the dashboard, and there we have it. So this is a cool thing too, just to show you. You can see that we're maxed out on running back and flex, so it's going to pop LeGarrette Blount over into our sub. So he's actually not going to factor into a lot of the math that's going on. Anyway, that's the mock draft with the tool. Again, ffdraftprep@gmail.com if you have any questions. Thanks for watching, and we'll look forward to helping you win some leagues this year. All right, thanks. Bye.